look at all this hair, man. I know I said last video that I looked like a budget Lord Farquaad, but I think we all know who I look like this time. So, this is the final year of my music degree, and in order to graduate, I needed to do one major last project. I had no idea what I wanted to do for this, aside from the fact that I knew I wanted to build something, and I wanted it to involve nature somehow. But other than that, I was completely stumped. Until my teacher Mark introduced me to something called an Aeolian Harp. So Aeolian harps are a pretty ancient invention that were first described in the Renaissance period. They are traditionally made out of wooden boxes with strings attached to them, and instead of playing them like you would a normal harp with your hands, they actually use something called the von Karman vortex street effect, which I definitely didn't pronounce correctly, but anyway, it's essentially the wind moving through the strings in such a way that they vibrate and create sound, but without the need for a plectrum or fingers or anything else to play it with. You may have heard this effect yourself. If you have been around power lines or any sort of taut cabling when it's been super windy, you might have heard a really eerie sort of sound, and that's basically what Aeolian harps use to function. The wind is moving through them at the right angle and at the right speed, so the strings vibrate, or the cables vibrate and create sound. So my plan was now to build my own Aeolian harp, which can be done in a lot of different ways, but in the spirit of my last video, I decided to try and make as much of my harp out of scrap materials as I could. Then, once it was finished, I was going to take it to some sea cliffs and record it. But of course, nothing went to plan. Based on a few guides I found, I decided to use gutter downpipe to form my harp body, but despite my best efforts, I could not for the life of me find it as scrap. Only as 3-meter long lengths of the hardware, which aside from being a bit wasteful and expensive, was of course not scrap. After a few solid walks around my neighbourhood, I came across this, a discarded vegetable oil drum, which, with a bit of hacking, seemed like it would work nicely. I found some junk wood that could be used to create attachment points for the strings, and as supports for the whole thing so it didn't collapse like an accordion when I tuned it up. Now, at this point I should probably talk a bit about the concepts behind this build. So, two of the earliest known cultures to use a form of harp in their music were the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Celtic people of Ireland. And I wanted to pay homage to these peoples when building my harp. When painting the body, I chose to use red to represent Egypt. It was commonly used by the civilization in its artwork to depict vitality, energy, and evil intentions. Now, before you throw something at me for using anything other than green for Ireland, the country's original symbol was a harp on a blue background that represented sovereignty in early Irish mythology. I also tried to stencil on the Eye of Ra and a Celtic cross, but would you believe it if I told you that using paper for this doesn't work too well? Also, there is a good reason that I don't study drawing. Oh, I should also mention that I made the backing tracks for this video. And also wrote a piece for a non-Aeolian harp. I'll put a link to this piece in the description, but please be nice, because not only have I never tried to build a harp before, I've definitely never written for one either. In fact, I'm not even totally convinced that I've touched an actual harp before, so not quite sure how I ended up here. Oh, and also, I mostly composed the backing music in A432Hz as well, using some Egyptian and Irish scales, which was actually a pretty interesting process that I might make a guide for in the future for the 3 people still living that would be interested in that. To attach the strings to the harp body, I used partial thread screws on one end and zither tuning pins drilled into the wood on the other. Finding these tuning pins almost broke me, as every provider shipped from out of the country and gave delivery estimates of about a month after my project was due. What, or rather who, ended up saving me was a guardian angel by the name of Taris, who responded to my plea for help in a Facebook group and was able to supply me with exactly what I needed, which included a wealth of knowledge aside from the tuning pins and tuning handle. So thank you, Taris. Go check out his social media accounts in the description. He's one talented and knowledgeable guy when it comes to anything harp and beyond. I also tried to represent these cultures by using classical guitar strings on one side of the harp to represent the stringed instrument traditions of Ireland, and fishing line strings on the other side to represent the fishing culture of ancient Egypt. Now, did I accidentally put each set of strings on the wrong side? Maybe. Did I also perhaps arrange the strings from thick to thin in opposing directions so that if you were to attempt to play it by hand, it might fry your brain a little bit? Also maybe. Now, there is truly no clear answer for exactly what tuning methods were used by either of these two ancient cultures. Apparently, people back then didn't think of me when they were designing their musical systems. The ancient Greeks were a lot more considerate though, thankfully, and did an awful lot of writing stuff down, including their tuning methods, and as there was a fair bit of musical crossover between Egypt and Greece towards the end of the Egyptian Empire, we can maybe assume that some Egyptian musicians tuned their harps to the fancy new Pythagorean tuning. No prizes for naming the inventor. This system is based off the 3-2 ratio, otherwise known as a perfect fifth. Calculating tuning this way is laborious, at least for someone who would have dropped maths in primary school had it been an option. So I used the ClearTune app, which can be set to Pythagorean just intonation tuning, with the A note calculated at 432 Hz rather than our modern 440 Hz. This also meant that if I tried to play the harp alongside almost any modern instrument, it would sound queasily out of tune. Alright, quick interjection. So, I've had a few setbacks. The weather has looked like this for like at least 2 weeks now. So finding a time to be filming outside has been difficult. My mate who was supposed to be helping me film also unfortunately had to cancel. So I made an impulse decision and bought a GoPro, which got delayed in Singapore for a while, but you might be able to tell this camera quality is a little different, and that's because it's on a GoPro. So it came, so we're good. But I tried a few tests with the harp in the window, and I'm not even sure this thing is going to work because it straight up just didn't make any sound when I tried the window test. But I've managed to get a short window after work tomorrow that I can go and test it out on the cliffs. So fingers crossed, I really hope this works. Wish me luck. So, yeah, you might be able to tell at this point that the harp wasn't exactly working quite the way I'd hoped. But not to worry, I made backups. Yep, that's right, I actually made 4 harps, the other 3 being made out of cardboard, courtesy of Amazon and the bin at my work. So, would these save my ass? Yeah, no, the answer is a definite no. And I'd been pretty hopeful too, seeing as the wind was so strong where we set the harps up that it was difficult to even stand, and more than once, everything that weighed less than 10 kilos tried to form its own air force and invade the sky several hundred meters away. But just as I was walking back to the car feeling very defeated, I was thinking to myself, man, this is definitely the part of the movie where at the last moment before defeat, a miracle occurs. Well, that's when this happened. So it wasn't quite the stunning victory I'd conceived of in my head, but it did make sound. And, thankfully, when I took the harps home and tried them in the window that afternoon while it was still very windy, they worked. Well, the cardboard ones did anyway. So, what tips can I pass on after this project? Well, definitely try and install the harp in a window. I found it a lot easier to make sound that way. And that way you can also experiment with different cross breezes in the house too. So, if you try opening some doors, closing others, just until you get the right combination that creates the best flow of wind through the house and hits those strings in the best way to make sound. Also, try moving the bridge of the harp underneath your strings while the harp is playing. It creates this really awesome sound that wouldn't be out of place in a horror film. Finally, try experimenting with different types of fishing line. So, as far as I know, it does need to be monofilament line, but that still means you can try fluorocarbon leader, which is a denser material than standard monofilament, and apparently makes a better sound too. But is that it for me and Aeolian Harps? Well, definitely for now. That project not only took several months, but also small pieces of my soul and sanity. Although, I will say, I have been eyeing up this bloody great IKEA box that just rocked up in my living room. But before I end this, I need to say thank you to my teacher Mark, who made this project possible, and to Mr. Stan Hershonik, whose YouTube guides took a lot of the guesswork out of my builds. Also, as this video skipped over a lot of detail from this project, I'm just going to leave a link below to some of my additional resources. But that's it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I do have some projects coming up that I'm really excited about, so feel free to leave a sub and you won't miss any of those. Cheers.